Imagine you could step inside the minds of Canada's healthcare leaders, glimpse their greatest fears, strongest drivers, and what makes them tick. Welcome to Healthcare Changemakers, a podcast where we talk to leaders about the joys and challenges of driving change and working with partners to create the safest healthcare system.
Hey listeners, it's Philip from Hirok, and I'm also here with Abby, our news team member. Hey Abby, how are you doing today?
Hi, Philip. I'm doing great. I'm actually excited to be here today as we host Dr. Glaucomflecken. You've most likely watched one of Dr. G's videos either on TikTok or on Twitter. He caught our attention because of his unique presence on socials, as well as his ability to truly engage people about healthcare.
You're absolutely right, Abby. In today's conversation, we touch upon Dr. G's journey from stand-up comedian to ophthalmologist. And yes, you heard me right. I did say comedian. We also get a glimpse of his life now, his practice, his family life, and of course, learning how he navigates being in the spotlight.
Okay, Philip, let's get to it. Everyone meet Dr. Glaucomflecken.
So welcome, and so for those of you who don't know, tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do.
So I am an ophthalmologist and slash social media. I call myself like an internet comedian ophthalmologist. So in my day job is a comprehensive ophthalmologist out here in Portland, Oregon. And then in my free time, evenings, weekends, holidays, whenever I can find the time, I do this social media stuff as Glaucomflecken, Dr. Glaucomflecken. And I dress up as different specialties in medicine and record satirical videos and make fun of the U.S. healthcare system, among other things. And yeah.
I love that. And so you currently have a major platform on social media with over 2 million followers and a variety of platforms. And like you said, you make comedic videos about the medical world. So what
Yeah.
exactly inspired you to be a content creator?
You know, I've always loved comedy. I've always been a big fan. Started doing stand up when I was in high school.
What? Cool.
Yeah. I was 17 years old going to these open mics in Houston, Texas with a friend of mine. I was too young to like stay past a certain hour at night. Like they kicked me out at like 9 p.m. or something. So, um, and so I've always kind of been in that world. I never really seriously considered it as a career, though. It was always just a hobby for me. I thought it was like way too hard to try to become a comedian, so I went the easier route of becoming a doctor. And I continued doing stand up in high school and in college and in the first couple years of med school until life got a little bit just more difficult and challenging and time consuming doing medicine. So I started writing a little bit more, and that eventually, turned into social media and videos. And so that's kind of where I am now. It's really, I've always approached it not really as like a career. It's just a hobby. It's just something I love to do. I love making people laugh, and I love exploring that creativity that you can do. It's have this blank canvas that you can just create something. It's just really exciting, and it's just so different than what you do in medicine a lot of times. So
Very
yeah.
different. But hearing that now, do you feel that your background in comedy and writing and being, that kind of, unique characters, do you find that it's helped you in your career in medicine?
I think it's helped with my mental health.
Oh, that's
So
good.
personally, yeah, it's a way to explore some of the frustrating things that we all deal with in medicine, both on the physician side but also on the patient side, and so that's been one huge benefit just to me personally. My I do talk about all this stuff with patients, and that's gotten more common where people come in and they recognize me and they actually make an appointment with me because they saw my videos or something. It's always a really fun conversation. I really enjoy asking people what their favorite characters are, and it's always Jonathan, and or they ask my scribe who's in the room with me, is like, is this your Jonathan? And I'm sure my scribe loves that, to hear that, like, a few times a day. So um, uh and so I think it's helped me personally. I think it being able to learn a lot about the healthcare system by trying to put together these skits has taught me a lot about it, and that it's also allowed me to relate to my patients a little bit better from a different perspective. And so, yeah, I do think overall it's been a huge benefit to me as a physician.
Oh, very cool. And so some people may not know this, but you did mention in the beginning, but Dr. Glaucomflecken is the name of your online persona rather than your real name.
Yeah, no, yeah, I'm not, people will call the office asking to make an appointment with Dr. Glaucomflecken. And the front staff, I feel so bad for them. They have to say, no, actually, his name is Will Flannery. It's Dr. Flannery. And they're like, no, I want to see Dr. Glaucomflecken. And so sometimes it's a kind of, tricky conversations, but but yeah, it's not, no, Glaucomflecken it's actually a word in ophthalmology. It's like an exam finding that you see in patients with certain types of glaucoma.
Ah,
Yeah, so when I was trying to come up with a pseudonym as like my comedy persona on social media, because I wanted to be anonymous at first. I was like, okay, what's the most ridiculous word in ophthalmology? And that was a clear and obvious, like, front runner.
well, it definitely caught our attention.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But now that it's more like me as Dr. Glaucomflecken is more famous, I would say, than the actual, like, exam finding that's been around for, like, 300 years. And so people try to, like, I know there's, like, some students around the world, they're like, what is this glaucoma? I need to learn about this." And all they get is, like, me dressed up,
Oh,
like, as a neurologist. What is going on?
you've single-handedly created a whole new, I don't even want to go what to call it, like a whole new like platform of using that word.
Right, exactly. So,
Well, that's too funny. Well, in 2020, you went into a sudden and mysterious cardiac arrest, and your
yes.
wife saved your life by performing CPR on you until the paramedics arrived. And so, how did this experience change your outlook on life and, I guess, your career?
Well, this happened right around, like, right at the height of the pandemic. And so one thing that it actually did was I was developing a big name for myself in medical circles, but, still fairly, I, I wasn't like as well known as I am now, I would say. And so at that time, though, this is during lockdown pretty much, and everyone was on social media all the time. And so, not only was my content starting to gain steam just because there were so many people sitting at home with nothing to do. So
Mhm.
they're like, well, started watching my videos, but also like I had this amazing event happen, where I essentially died. My wife saved my life. And so I, that alone, just that combination of things just expanded my platform like crazy.
Mhm.
And that's really, it changed my life in that respect, because all of a sudden, like more people were watching my videos and they were listening to me talk about my experience as a patient going through the healthcare system. And just by virtue of it being during the pandemic and more people were online, the messages, the things I was talking about were just spreading more widely. Um, from a, you know, personal standpoint, obviously, going through something like that, it changes your perspective um, on life, on um, family and priorities, where you spend your time. And up until that point, I had done a lot of speaking, and that was starting to gain steam. And now I had to think a little bit more about, how much time do I really want to spend away from my family,
Mhm.
and so it just, time it has a different meaning, and that was really, a, a a big deal, like right at the beginning when I first came home from the hospital. And probably for the first, 6 to 9 months, and it started to fade a little bit as you kind of get back into your normal daily routine, but it's still there. I still feel that, like, I don't want to be away from my wife and kids, for, I'd rather just have this be like a 2-day trip instead of a 4-day trip. And
Yes.
can we, or maybe I don't want to do that speaking engagement because it's all the way on the East Coast. And that's like, 3 days that I don't get to be with my family. I don't know if I would feel that as strongly if I hadn't gone through what I had gone through. And so, you know, in a way is a little bit of a positive there, I guess, and among a lot of terrible things that have
Of
happened.
course.
And then as a physician, the cardiac arrest has, it has changed what I talk about with patients. I'm more open with patients now about my own health issues if I feel like it's relevant to talk about that. Because a lot of my patients are in their 70s, 80s, 90s. They've gone through or are going through cancer or heart problems or the healthcare system dealing with insurance and billing and all these things. So I'm much more willing and able to relate to my patients and talk with them about those types of things than I was before the cardiac arrest.
Is your wife also in healthcare?
She is not. No, she had done a CPR class like as part of a job in college or something, like 15 years ago, and and so she when this happened, she had no formal medical training, and they had walked her. The dispatcher walked her through CPR, and she has been a huge advocate ever since that event for co-survivors or the people who go through these medical traumas right there alongside with the patient. And because in a lot of ways, sometimes these medical traumas, and it was the case for me because I just went to bed one night and I woke up in the ICU a couple days later.
Mm,
Uh, it's a lot of times it's harder for the people that actually are go through those medical traumas. And that was the case for her. And so she's been a big advocate for, talking about that with medical audiences in particular. Like, hey, don't forget about, the people who are experiencing these as well. It's not just the
no,
patient.
absolutely, absolutely. But I can't stress how important it is if you can get CPR training. I did the same thing as your wife. I had taken it some time ago, and I thought, oh, I don't need this, and then I ended up needing it.
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy. I was a doctor for like 10 years before. And for all that time, I never once thought, "Hey, maybe my, like, non-medical spouse should learn CPR." I
Yeah,
was always like, "Well, if something happens somewhere, like, I'll be the one that we're usually together, like,
yeah.
I'll do." Uh, but no, I was the one that needed it. So you'd be surprised, and I try to tell people that a lot. I was like, "Listen, I know you're all in medicine," because I talk to a lot of physician audiences, and like, but I guarantee you have somebody in your life, family, friends that are not in medicine that don't know CPR,
Yeah.
and usually there's a lot of people like that. So yeah, everybody should be taught everywhere, schools, workplaces, all that stuff.
So, well, you're not new to podcasts as you host your own show with your wife called Knock Knock Hi with the Glaucomfleckens. So,
That's
can you
right.
tell us a little bit about your podcast and why people should tune in?
Yeah, yeah. Well, we wanted to do something a little bit more long form. I figured, well, if people are willing to look at me for 2 minutes at a time on TikTok, maybe they'd be willing to, watch or listen to me for like 45 minutes. I don't know. So, and this is something that Kristen and I, my wife, we've been wanting to do for a while, because one of the big things we talk about is kind of humanity and medicine in particular, like making doctors seem human. That's a big
Yeah.
thing for me, and that's why I love doing what I do on social media, and I love it when other physicians or healthcare professionals like show off their sense of humor or show off their emotions or the things they're dealing with, the frustrations in their life on social media. And so this podcast is a way to it's just an extension of that. We bring on medical people, mostly physicians, and we have them tell some stories from, usually it's from their training, because that's when all the good stories happen, is when like medical training and residency, med school. And we have a lot of fun. And it always brings up like important topics that we explore and we laugh about. And I always try to play a little game with our guests, specific to their specialty. And it's just a way to show people that doctors are just regular people, and that are under a lot of the same pressures as everyone else, and some extra ones as well. But we're all just regular people, and we're going through regular things, and we have senses of humor, and we like to laugh and cry and get angry at times, and there's just normal people. And so that's kind of the idea of this podcast, and it's been a lot of fun. And I love having Kristen there too, because as a co-host, because she brings a non-medical perspective, which I think is very important. Because doctors, I think people just get tired of like hearing doctors talk to each other, and so we need some outside influence, and so she provides that.
Has there been any aha moments on your podcast with any of your guests?
Well, I mean, we've talked to a couple of oncologists, which it was great. We had a Dr. Don Dizon, who is a medical oncologist, and we played a game with him where we had him teach us how to deliver bad news.
Oh.
And Kristen and I took turns delivering bad news to each other, and her bad news to me was that no, in fact, she is a lot funnier than me. And so that was a fun experience, and also I got to learn a thing or two, and that's kind of the goal of the podcast. Like we want people to learn something about
Yeah.
medicine, while also just having fun listening to people tell jokes and laugh. And so, yeah, I never know with each guest. Each guest brings something different, because they're all in different areas of medicine and healthcare. And so I never know what we're going to end up talking about, for the most part. And it's always fun to see where it goes.
That's cool. Laughter is a form of medicine.
It is some would say, the most important form of medicine.
Exactly.
Unless you need neural medicine, then you might die laughing. But that's neither here nor there.
Stop. I'm going to pass it over to Abby now. Welcome, Abby.
Hi, Dr. G. It's great to meet you.
Hi, good to meet you.
So, in the recent years, there's been an ongoing trend of healthcare professionals having an online platform where they're really able to show their personality and who they are outside the hospital or wherever they practice. So, in what ways do you think the perception of professionalism is changing, especially within the medical field?
Yeah, that's a good question. I love this topic, because over the past, like, I don't know, 10 years, like you've seen a lot more medical professionals, especially people coming up in medicine, so pre-meds, med students, residents, have a social media presence. And it's quite often they start off anonymous. I was the same way. I was like, oh, I'm going to be telling jokes. Like, I don't know how this is going to go over with people. Like, am I going to get in trouble? Am I going to get fired because I'm just using my sense of humor? Like, that's a legitimate concern.
Yeah.
And it speaks to where the idea of professionalism has been for a long time in medicine. It's been this notion that you can't talk about the difficult things in your life. You can't talk about things that made you angry or sad, or jokes that you tell to people, because that's not considered professional for a doctor to talk about those things. And I do think that is absolutely changing, and it's changing with the new generation of doctors that are coming up, and also because they've grown up on social media as well, and they're facile with social media, and they kind of get it, and and I think it's really a wonderful thing that this idea of professionalism is changing to allow everybody in medicine to express themselves more, because we need the public to see that side of us. we need them to see us as like real human beings who are not like robots who memorized a textbook. And so I love it. I love it. I think for too long, professionalism has been a little bit weaponized against doctors, and I do think that's going away, and it should. Now, that doesn't mean like you could just do whatever the hell you want on the internet as a physician, because we do have a very unique position in society where we have people's lives. I mean, not me, like their eyes, not their lives, in our hands. And so we do have to be respectful of that and not do anything that undermines the patient physician relationship. And so there are rules, there are things that I abide by and that I hope everybody else does, uh, to not undermine that, the public trust in physicians and other healthcare professionals. But it should not come at the expense of our own self-expression. And that's kind of the main point.
For sure. And I'm personally loving this trend of content creation in healthcare. I follow a lot of healthcare professionals myself. And as you mentioned before, it's really breaking that stereotype that healthcare workers have to be really serious all the time. No,
Yeah.
they can be creative, funny. In your case, make comedy skits and still do their job amazingly. So I'm really enjoying that.
Yeah, I want people to like, I've spent a lot of time as a patient. Like, I want my doctors like to be relatable, right? Like, I want them to like seem like someone I could just have a casual conversation with, and so I totally agree.
For sure, it really does humanize them. And on the topic of this ongoing trend, who are some of your favorite content creators in healthcare? And bonus points if they're Canadian.
Let's see the Canadian one. Let's see. Do I know any? So some of them I'm not. I don't know for sure if they're Canadian. But but that's okay. Um, let's see. So there's a lot of people on Twitter that's where I grew up on social media, so to speak, with as Dr. Glaucomflecken. And so there are a handful of I have just friends, on social media. Um, I'll give a shout out to a few of them. There's Dr. Amy G. Dalla is my one of my BFFs on Twitter. We wrote for Gomer Blog together. She's a pediatric neurologist, and I really enjoyed her perspective on things and laughing with her. There's some things Brian Carmody who is doing great work on social media around the match and some of the issues that are really important um, to med students. Mama Dr. Jones is fantastic. Emily Silverman, who's does a lot with storytelling in medicine, and which is we need so much more of that. So yeah, I've got. I mean, there's too many to count. There's so many people doing awesome things, and finding those little areas of medicine that we need to hear more about. And so I love people getting out there and creating all kinds of content. It's fantastic.
Shout out to them. We'll be sure to check them out. And I'm curious myself. So, in terms of healthcare content, what types of content do you prefer to watch? The comedy skits, educational, day in the life, for example. There's so many different types. So, what do you prefer watching in the healthcare field?
Yeah, I really appreciate anybody that can combine entertainment with education. So, Med Life Crisis is a great one with this. Rohan Francis. So he's from the UK. He's a cardiologist. Yeah, he's a cardiologist, and just does unbelievable these YouTube videos, educational, but combining lots of humor. I think he's got a comedy background as well, and so that's there's no like better way to connect with somebody, including an audience on social media, than making them laugh. That's why I think these skits are so like some of them are just about the most like boring healthcare system topics, like prior authorizations and deductibles, and like under no circumstances should anybody really be interested in these topics. but by putting them through a lens of humor, all of a sudden I can like kind of trick people into learning about something about these issues, and so I appreciate people that are able to do that and makes medical education fun, because it should be fun, and that's how you're going to reach the most people.
For sure, being creative is definitely the most captivating way to get an audience. Um,
Yeah.
so, so switching gears just a little bit, being vulnerable and sharing personal things online is not an easy thing to do, especially when you have a big platform. People leave comments, give their opinions, whether that be nice or hateful. So, what inspired you to publicly share your experience with testicular cancer and your cardiac arrest?
Well, honestly, for me, it was my way of coping, because I had always used comedy as a defense mechanism, as a coping mechanism, and social media was just how I was doing my comedy. And so before I had been on social media, I had, when I had my first diagnosis of testicular cancer, I processed that by doing stand up, like in person stand up, going to comedy clubs and stuff. But then in residency, when I got the second testicular cancer diagnosis, and later on when I had the cardiac arrest, I had I there's no time. I was not doing any in-person comedy. I was on social media. That was my comedy. That was my outlet. And so that's the reason I started doing it, just because it was a way for me to cope. It was a way for me to take those difficult things in my life and add humor to them and present it to others and share a laugh. That's a very powerful thing. And to be able to do that to hundreds of thousands, millions of people, it's great. And when you're talking about some of these very personal things, there's not a whole lot of negativity around it. People are, I mean, there's always like one or two, but are almost universally supportive, and so it's been a wonderful experience to be able to talk about these things and hear from other people's perspectives and hear other people had similar stories as well. And so, but it's a very personal decision. Not everyone's going to be as open as I am about their own medical issues, and that's a personal decision. It works for me, might not work for somebody else, and that's okay.
I think it's really important that you shared that because, as much as social media could be a place that is hateful, it's also a place that people get inspired, feel like they're not alone, get motivation to keep on pushing through. So, thank you for being courageous and sharing that part of your life.
Oh.
And I'm sure a lot of people can relate to the health scares that you've been through, and it's something that definitely takes a mental toll. So, how do you keep a positive mind and focus on your well being through it all?
I'm not a super like futuristic thinking person. Like I'm not that type of person. I'm very much like, what do I got to do today? What's on my mind right now? What am I going to deal with right now? And so it in a lot of ways it keeps me from perseverating on like the fact that I now am a 37-year-old two-time testicular cancer survivor who's also had a cardiac arrest. And so I don't think a lot about like, oh man, like, am I going to live till I'm 50, till I'm 60? I don't know. Chances are things are not looking great right now. So I don't really think that way a lot. I think more in the moment, which has helped me maintain positivity. I still have my moments though. And, you know, family's still there and my friends are still there. And I have an unbelievably supportive audience on social media. I like what I've created and what we've all created together as this Glaucomflecken community is it's truly remarkable, and I am very thankful for it.
That's great. I feel like sometimes it doesn't always have to be, oh, I meditate, I journal. Sometimes it's just I live in the moment, I focus on right now, and I'm happy this way, which is amazing. And something that we have in common actually between my team's role in marketing and communications and your role as a content creator is that constant creativity is required to captivate our audience and keep it exciting. So, how do you stay creative when making content?
Yeah, sometimes it feels like a chore, you know. It's I mean it is a business now. Like this is like Glaucomflecken. I have like an LLC. It's like an actual business. And so it certainly as it's gotten bigger, it has felt like a business at times. And it wasn't I didn't I didn't start this to turn this into like some money making side gig. It is just this was my creative outlet, and so it, you know, it's a in some ways it is kind of frustrating to have that feeling like you got to produce content. Like I hate that feeling, but it does that has become more common because the platform has grown and we have like bills we have to pay around this thing this with our production team and all. So it's grown to the point where okay, well now I actually do like have to create the content, and that is a stress at times. It is still fun though, otherwise I'd just like hang it all up and not do it. But um there there are times when it's like I really don't want to record a video. I'm leaving to we're going to Australia tomorrow, and I'm like, okay, I probably have to film something now so I can like put something out there, so it's not going to be like 2 weeks before I
Wow.
like have a new
Yeah.
video. So it's like stuff like that I gotta, it can be very frustrating whenever it's something that's supposed to be purely fun. But it's again, in the end, for me, and Kristen always reminds me, my wife always reminds me of this. Like this is supposed to be fun. So when it stops being fun, we need to figure out why and make a change. And so as long as I'm still enjoying it, then I'm going to keep doing it. And I just you got to kind of work sometimes to keep it that way.
Yeah, because that's why you got into this to begin with, into content creation to make people laugh, and it was
Yeah,
fun for you. So I hope it continues to be that way.
thank you.
I'm going to pass it back on to Philip to ask one last question before the lightning round.
I know you're going to Australia, so you could even do some content there. That'd be kind of. I'd
Yeah.
looking forward to seeing that.
I usually bring a few pairs of glasses and like a couple hats or something just in case
See?
something strikes me. Yes.
Well, now that we got the inside scoop that you're going tomorrow, we'll definitely be keeping an eye out to see what you produce. But well, it's very clear that to Abby and I that your family means a lot to you, and so the beginning when we started talking to you today, you talked about how you made that you were doing some stand up, and then, and then you made
Mhm.
this pivot to medicine. I'm laughing because it's like, oh, I'm just picturing me telling my mom like, oh yeah, I'm doing stand up, but actually I'm going to be applying to med school.
Yeah. Right.
So I guess in that moment, and I think about what struck me was like, oh, what did your parents say? Like, and on top of that, like, is there someone, I know how much your wife means to you and your family, but was there someone in your childhood, a parent, a grandparent, I don't know, cousin, a brother, who I don't know who, a sister, who really kind of helped you on this journey and got you to where you are today?
I've had a lot of support over the years, and from a comedy standpoint, that pivot from comedy, because I did briefly think like, should I do comedy as a career? Because I mean, no one's really good at stand up comedy when they first get started, but I had a little bit of talent. Like I was just naturally kind of a funny person, and with anything in life, the more you do it, the better you're going to get at it. So I was like slowly improving, but honestly, I was like looking around at people who were in their 40s 50s still trying to make it in comedy, and I was like, oh, this seems really hard, let me do something much easier. So I went to med school, which didn't not a you know looking back, obviously not quite as easy as I thought it would be. And so, I had always really been interested in like math and science and stuff. So I thought about med school, going to medicine pretty early, like in junior high. I remember thinking about it. There's no doctors in the family, so I was the first one. But so I always just viewed the comedy thing as a hobby. It wasn't really something I very seriously considered as a career. And my parents didn't like. I didn't tell them I was going to go into comedy clubs and doing comedy.
You went rogue.
It was me, and it was a friend of mine who I'm still friends with. He's the best man at my wedding, and
Aw.
he's a year older than me, and he told me he was going to do open mics in Houston. I was like, oh, that sounds fun. I want to do it. And so he's the one that got me into it. And probably when you asked about, influences or people that have helped me along the way, like he was the first person that came to mind, because I still to this day run jokes by him, and he he helps me with some of my content as well. I'm like, hey, I'm trying to think of something about neurosurgeons. Can you help me out or something? And so yeah, he's and just we've been friends for 20 years, and it's so from a comedy standpoint, and also he's not in medicine. I really encourage anybody who's in healthcare to like have people outside of healthcare that you talk to regularly because
Absolutely, yeah.
that's just a good perspective to have. So yeah, I think he's been a big part of my life.
Oh, that's nice. What's his name?
Joseph.
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 Shout out to Joseph.
Yeah, funny. So, oh my god, just effortlessly funny. It's the things he says. It's like, man, I wish I had thought it. Like that happens so often when I talk to him. So he's just, oh, such a funny guy.
Very cool. No, it's good to have a good network, and it
Yes.
sounds like you definitely have that. So, and now we are made it to the end of our podcast with a quick lightning round. So Abby and I are going to ask you a few questions, and you just say the first thing that comes to your mind. It can be short or long. If you could tell your past self one thing, what would it be?
Don't have a cardiac arrest.
That's a good one. Yes. What's the best gift you've been given?
Probably a picture drawn by my children. They like
Aw.
to draw, and they will draw pictures for me sometimes. It's not cute. Sometimes I'm really hideous, but that's okay. At least the effort is what counts.
This is a side question, but speaking of your children, what do they think about about Dr. Glaucomflecken?
They love it. Oh, they still think I'm funny. They're not old enough to think I'm super lame or anything. So, although the oldest is, she's getting there, but it's yeah, they love watching the videos. We always watch them together.
I was going to say, obviously, I know they're not teenagers because you're quite young. So I'm like, well,
Not yet.
these
Not yet.
teenagers have been like, what? You're recording what?
We got a little bit of time before teenage years.
Okay, good. Abby?
What's your dance like no one's watching song?
Honestly, lately I've been dancing a lot with what my children are playing, and it's like Katy Perry, and Taylor Swift.
All good stuff.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. I know the song. I don't know the names of the songs, unfortunately, but everybody can just imagine me dancing with children to Taylor Swift.
Do you live by any piece of advice or motto?
Don't use Visine
Okay.
or sleep in your contacts. Is that too narrow? Did you want something a little bit broader? I'm sorry. Take care of your eyeballs, please, everyone.
If that's what you live by, we'll take it. Last question. What is your proudest achievement?
My proudest achievement is probably like being in my 30s and being able to like learn a new social media platform. So like I'm very proud of the fact that I was able to pick up TikTok, even though I'm not like a very technical person. In fact, Kristen helps me a lot with like, computer stuff. I'm like really bad at really bad. You wouldn't know it, but I'm terrible at it. So I am very proud of myself that I've like figured out, I've like learned like very basic cinematography and how to edit videos and how to navigate all these social media platforms because it's been a lot harder than it seems.
Yeah, I could never tell that content creators bad at technology. So you're good at hiding that fact. That was our last question. So that's all we have for you today. Thank you so much, Dr. G, for joining us on Healthcare Changemakers. It was really a pleasure getting to know you. Thank you for your thoughtful, honest answers, really.
Thank you so much for having me. This is a blast.
Thank you for listening. You can hear more episodes of Healthcare Changemakers on our website, heroc.com, and on your favorite podcasting apps. If you like what you hear, please rate us or post a review. Healthcare Changemakers is recorded by HEROC's Communications and Marketing Team and produced by Podfly Productions. Follow us on Twitter at HEROC Group or email us at communications@heroc.com. We'd love to hear from you.